Now, police have been forced to fire rubber bullets as protesters continue to intensify in parts of Johannesburg. Residents are demanding housing and land, which they say government promised them last year. Earlier, residents blocked the N1 and N12 roads, disrupting traffic across several townships in the south of the city. In a pamphlet circulating on social media, the Soweto Action Committee and Gauteng Civic Association has called for a complete shutdown of the area. The affected areas include Soweto, Freedom Park, Eldorado Park and Ennerdale. Further protest action is set to continue.
As we understand that civic society organizations across the board have organized various protests throughout Soweto, Ennerdale and Orange Farm, including Eldorado Park. The issues raised is issues around lack of delivery of services, in particular housing, but also a protest against the installation of prepaid electricity and water meters. Well, in Johannesburg in particular, we have 84 wards that are run by ANC councillors, in particular in Soweto, in Eldorado Park, in Orange Farm and parts of Alexandra. So we have a huge responsibility to organize communities, but in this particular instance, the ANC is entirely not involved in this mass demonstration, which seeks to even extend to damage property of council and private property.
This situation emanated from the promises that were made after the uprising, May uprising last year in Johannesburg South. At that time, the communities were demanding land, decent housing, decent jobs, quality free healthcare, and quality education. And the state responded by making some kind of promises. Like, for instance, they promised to allocate 48,000 stands to the communities in the Johannesburg South. Subsequently to that, there were pieces of land that were identified in Eldorado Park, in Freedom Park, in Ennerdale, different parts of communities in the Johannesburg South.
We went to the mayor's office. The mayor actually can't deal with us. We went to the MMC's office. The MMC's office state they are working from 1996 with the paperwork. And what they're going to do is they don't follow protocol. Transparency is not being done there. So what are they doing is they're working according to the computer, taking the people from that side and putting them into South Hills. South Hills also have people that is on the list. Why take our people from here to the South Hills? We mentioned it to the Human Rights Commission. People, old people, disability people, 5 years you can stay in a shack. Not more than 5 years.
Paul Mashatile was here last year. Promised us the 48,000 stands in Southern Farm, and he said they're going to work the land, the sanitation, your electricity. Up until today, there's nothing that has happened on that land. That's why we are here.
Current predicaments that we are facing right now is that during this long weekend, we experienced or we've seen 8 deaths here around this residence. There's corruption, there's death, killing going on. Our leaders were killed. Then we're having all information in the cluster. They're all being assassinated. It's like it's drama here.
Since last year, we're waiting for houses, and the houses never came out. Until it's a May again. Last year, May, until now. Until now. Our children haven't got places. They must stay in hawkies, in other people's yards.
You know what we've done is...
Because we haven't got a place to stay.
With the police clearing the roads, residents here have promised that this is only the beginning and that protests will continue and intensify if they still feel that government doesn't hear their call. Valerie Robinson, Afro World View, Johannesburg.
We now bring this conversation to the studio, the matter of land and the way that it continues to intensify. We're seeing the violent outbreaks and the protesters taking to the streets in several parts of the south of Johannesburg in Soweto. I have my guests in studio to expand this even further, starting off with Professor Shadrack Guto, constitutional expert, as well as political analyst Leva Ndor, and we also have COPE's Salata Wangwane. Good evening to you, gentlemen. Thank you for for your time. Thank you for joining us. The land issue continues to come back in all sorts of shapes and form. We see the debates that are taking place. We saw a debate on Monday. COPE, of course, Lokota really speaking rather firmly on the land issue, just emphasizing that there will be war. And we heard him speak and reiterate that at a press conference today.
Yes.
So what is your take on this? I mean, he's saying that it'll bring the country to its knees.
Yeah, thanks very much. There are basically two narratives to this debate. The one that says you take the land and you don't compensate for it. And the other one that says, no, do not do that. When you take the land, which has to happen anyway, you should compensate the people. Let me just indicate one thing. It is really very dangerous to do that, to take without compensation. Even if you can go and try and say, no, we will go and amend Section 25 of the Constitution. That is still dangerous and is still reckless and is still irresponsible because it is taking us 1,000 years back, you know, during the feudal system when rulers owned the land and people are only there to till. And this is something that those who support this narrative are not telling our people. They don't tell them that when the land is expropriated, it's not going to be owned by you, it's going to be owned by the state. People are, you know, thinking that, no, we're going to be given that land is going to be ours. No, they're going to be actually renting. They'll be leasing the land. That can't be correct. That's why I'm saying that it's taking us 1,000 years back. Currently, the current system that we're having in terms of the Constitution is that if people were taken or driven out of the land due to the laws, the apartheid laws since 1913, these people can now go and claim that land. And the state will then go to the owner and say, hey, Mr. Ando, you are living in the land that belongs to so-and-so. Then, please, you need to give way to it so that we can give it to the rightful people. It is applying that. It is there.
Professor Guto here, just to weigh in on the Section 25 constitutional act here, just to flesh out whether the dangers are as alarming as they should be, and is it a possibility at all to allow the process to unfold without making adjustments to the Constitution?
Yes, I think that it's important for us to underline that the Constitution, Section 25, is not the problem for land restitution and redistribution and giving tenure to people who did not have security of tenure in after 1994. So I think we have a progressive constitution which can be used. So we have to underline that the problem has been implementation rather than the constitution. And I think that the political party in power at the moment, the African National Congress, is trying to use the question, the constitution is the problem, rather than failure really to properly interpret the constitution. That's one. The second one, which I would like to indicate, is that we need to have really a vigorous move towards implementing Section 25 of the Constitution, dealing with land, water, and so on, but also with other sections in the Constitution dealing with housing, shelter for children, and so on. We have not been focusing on that. So the problem is implementation, and not just a question of the Constitution is the problem which we want, or the political party, ruling party wants to tell us the Constitution has been our problem. No, it is the ruling party which has been part of the problem.
Okay, let's move this to our other guest, who is South African Police spokesperson Lungelo Dlamini. As you speak about implementation, Prof, you also speak to the impact of the implementation and the dangers of the implementation not being foreseen, as in the streets of several parts of the south of Johannesburg this morning really just descended into chaos. We have welcome to you, Lungelo Dlamini. Thank you for your time. Just give us an outlook of what is happening now as we speak on the streets of Soweto. How are the community members dealing with the outbreak?
Now, but in the early hours of we saw a situation where there were many cars on the road. And then some of the roads they were stopped, but you find that there were no people inside there. And we removed those stones. But during the day, a group of about 80 protesters tried to prevent the members of the public by stoning the vehicles on the road. And the police retaliated by firing rubber bullets to disperse them.
And what is the situation as we speak?
At this stage, it's calm, but the South African Police, Johannesburg Metro Police, and the Gauteng Traffic, they will be patrolling the areas for 24 hours.
And in terms of the management of the crowd, how have officers on the ground managed and contained the flare-ups of this contentious matter?
We are appealing to the members of the public that wherever they are protesting, they mustn't use force. They mustn't prevent the other people from using the road. But when they do that, we are going to apply the law. We cannot allow a lawless situation to erupt.
And have you made any arrests at this point?
At this stage, no one was arrested today.
And in terms, I mean, you say your officers are on the ground monitoring the situation. And is there any indication that protesters might regroup?
We really don't know. They regroup from time to time, but we don't know what's happening. But our crime intelligence is also on the ground. They are reporting to us from now and again what is the position on the road.
Now, your officers had their hands full for most of the day, of course, starting off in the morning. At this point in time, are you looking at all to ensure that there is perhaps a bigger visibility of officers on the ground?
They will be patrolled throughout the night. As I say, the Metropolitan Services, the South African Police, as well as the Gauteng Traffic, they will be patrolling the roads.
And have all roads been cleared of the garbage and the debris that was on the road?
They were cleared from midday up to this afternoon. The traffic is now moving smoothly on the road.
And before we let you go, is there a certain warning that you'd like to send out to residents who may be thinking of taking to the streets in a violent fashion?
We believe there are some lawful means of protest, but those unlawful means where they are blocking the roads, preventing other members of the public to use the roads, those are unlawful actions. And the police will take action for any unlawful action that is taking place.
Thank you so much for your time. That SAPS spokesperson, Colonel Lungelo Dlamini, they're giving us an update on the human element of the story. Of course, gentlemen, it touches on the very burning residents themselves. They are frustrated. There's a huge housing backlog in this country. I want to come to you, Ntatando, just to really give us an indication. I mean, we can see the impact. There's evidence today of how the streets are burning in Soweto and parts of the city. There's a backlog and residents are fed up. Where does this point to?
Well, I think one must indicate the fact that there should be a difference between the land problem and the housing problem. Because for me, with the land, it is not only about housing, it's about reproduction, it's about farming, it's about doing a variety of issues. But I think what we need to appreciate in South Africa is that there are processes that have started to unfold. The ANC NASREC took a resolution on land expropriation without compensation in December. And there was a motion that was proposed in Parliament and adopted. And as we speak now, there are parliamentary processes that are coming into the picture. That will tell you that this issue is now in motion. But for me, I need to appreciate what political parties are doing and what ordinary members of the society are actually doing. And when we always talk about the views by COPE, for me, these are genuine views that everybody must listen to and give them space in this entire discourse. All citizens in South Africa are allowed by the Constitution to participate and add their views on any other matter. COPE is represented in Parliament, and I would expect COPE, like all other parties that are in Parliament, to add their views in the parliamentary processes, convince their colleagues in Parliament and the entire society to adopt a particular approach. And for me, all of us now have a responsibility to say, how then do we implement what the Parliament has actually started to do? I've seen a number of political parties trying to convince people through different means, surveys, to say, what is your view on the proposal that is on the table? And for me, in the context of democracy and our freedom, this is the right thing to do, so that when people, at the end of the day, have to adopt, finally, the implementation stage, they should have known the advantages and the disadvantages of the decision that they're actually taking.
Let's move this to you, Mr. Nkwane. At this point in time, do you believe that South Africans are being done a disservice by politicians, including COPE?
Yeah. It will depend exactly from what angle are you saying this. However, if you can look at this, the way it has been taken, as Ndo has just said, that this matter is now going through the parliamentary process where the public is allowed to view, to say what they feel about what has to take place. That is the right thing to do. However, there is a challenge that we are having, that our communities, especially political parties, are not tolerant of other views. They think that whatever they say is the right thing. And that can be. It is important that we must allow every party to indicate and to say what they feel. Then, after all this, the public can now make a decision, an informed decision, as to what they think is right and what is not right. You don't go there and stop the other, stifle, freedom of expression, freedom of speech. We've seen it happening in Parliament. We've seen it happening on Monday, where, when the co-president was speaking, there was a lot of howling and so on. Unfortunately, these people think that whatever they think, it is to be taken that way. And that cannot be in a democratic society like ours. We need a situation whereby everybody is given a free space to express himself. That's it. That is the challenge that we see happening. And then, right, the other problem that I see is that for those who say, no, we need to go and take the land up, without compensation, they don't even explain to the people out there what would that mean to them. I just want to tell me, how will you feel if somebody come and take your own land, the land that you have bought, and say, now from now, it's no longer yours, now this land belongs to the state. Just like that. Do you think you're going to just to fold your arms and let it go? Really, you can't. But this is what it means.
So that's why you're saying that it could spark a war?
Yes, that it's dangerous. Well, you call it anything. It can be anything. You see, but the thing is, you cannot just go and take. And by the way, it's not only going to be the white section of our community that is going to suffer. We say we're taking expropriation of the land without compensation. So it means every section, everyone, even those black people who have got land, it will be taken, because the law will not say expropriation of the white man's land. It will say expropriation of land without compensation. That means everyone. So the very people that you saying you want to assist, you in fact not, because you are taking the land from them as well. And
Professor
that's the challenge.
You've said that in this case, implementation is the huge challenge here, irrespective of the actual constitution. What do you see as a way around this?
Well, what I see is that we need to have a debate in the public which really wants or should be able to make people understand that the phrase of expropriation of land without compensation is too wide, because it means that even when you have land in an informal settlement, or you have land in a village where in the former Bantustan areas, or you have agricultural land, white people owning it, it will be taken and the state will own it. The state is not responsible entity in dealing with these kind of issues. And I think that's where we need to open our eyes and be able to see that the political statements about land without expropriation of land without compensation becomes dangerous if it is not unpacked and put in a proper perspective. So that is, I think, where we should focus, because the way I see it is that, of course, people want land. African peoples want more land than they have at the moment, and rightfully so, because they were excluded. But to use that term to bring all of those ideas into the picture, even mineral resources are on land, forests are on land. So everything is on land. So when you begin to think of land in that context, it becomes very complex. And I think politicians are just throwing out words and trying to win.
And there's also, let me put this to Mr. Ndor, there's also besides politicians throwing words without a framework that seems realistic, there's also suggestion, I'm putting this to you, Mr. Ndor, suggestion and perhaps comment from the public that what would happen in a scenario that the land is indeed rolled out as planned, as thought out by politicians. What would the hierarchy be? Who would access which land? which land would be reserved for who. Because there are different types of land. There is land in posh suburbs and there's land in places where nothing grows.
I think it's important to note that the struggle for liberation in South Africa has always been centered around land. And that is another area that we don't have to ignore or avoid, because it will still come back to haunt us. What we need to do now is to look at how best are we supposed to utilize the parliamentary processes that are in place now in order to ensure that we unpack and identify all the different areas that requires special attention. But the bottom line now is that the wheel is moving. By August, we should be having something that relates to how land has to be reappropriated in South Africa. There are a number of facts that we cannot avoid, that the majority and the blacks in South Africa don't have access to land. In one way or another, that is the problem that must be solved. And what we need to do is to involve everybody. And also, the fears that are being raised by everyone should not be ignored, because this might be informed by a number of factors. But the issue at hand is that land has to be redistributed in South Africa.